A short while ago I published a video about a hole which was in this area, and it explained where the water from this river disappears underground there into that limestone. So there you have river, no river, river, no river. Today, let's keep walking south from here, and I'll show you something that I think is just as interesting. Hopefully you will too. Oh, by the way, this water, by the way, that drops underground here, a lot of people think it goes underground in the caves and comes out at the base of Malham Cove. It doesn't. It actually comes out at a place called Airhead Springs. The water that comes out of the bottom of Malham Cove actually comes from a place called Smelt Mill Sink. Smelt Mill Sink, it's quite hard to say, but that's where the Malham Cove River comes from. Anyway, let's carry on south, and I'll show you something. I've just walked south a bit down that from where the water was, but I think I'll stop for a cup of tea. It's quite a long way. This gap, by the way, this is the spot where we found two families about 2 years ago. Right here, they were sat on these rocks behind me. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were on a night navigation training session. And we came around this corner here and saw, I think there were 4 adults and about 5 kids, between 5 and 8 years old. I asked them if they were okay, and before any of the adults could say anything, one of the kids, I think she was a little girl of about, I'm guessing here, about 6 years old. She started to crying and shouting, "We're lost, can you help us?" These things happen. Apparently they'd parked their car in Malham, which is a couple of miles that way, and they'd walked up to the tarn, but they'd misjudged the amount of daylight that they had to get back to Malham. So they were using their mobile phones as torches, as you do. But obviously, it's quite a way. All their batteries eventually ran out. So they couldn't even make a call to the mountain rescue. Mind you, there's no phone signal around here anyway, not even 112. When we found them, they'd been sat on these rocks here for about 5 hours. Wow, not a problem. We gave all the kids our spare warm clothing and hot cup of tea, which, now, if you don't live in England, you probably won't know this, but most problems in life can be solved by a nice cup of tea. So we walked them back to where we parked our cars and drove them back to the car park in Malham. Oh, yeah, these things happen, don't they? But on this point, though, they did exactly the right thing. If you ever find yourself in the hills at night without the torch, just stop. Just sit down exactly where you are. Don't go any further. Do not start walking around in the dark, especially in areas like this. Getting a bit cold, it's a lot better than walking off a cliff. But hey, it all worked fine. It all worked out fine in the end, so that's okay. Right, I'll just finish my tea, and then we'll go down and find this hyper exciting thing that I promised you. So what was I talking about before I started waffling about mountain rescues? Oh yeah, I was talking, the river disappearing into the ground isn't what I wanted to show you today. Today I want to show you this. Wow, I knew you'd be impressed. Yes, it is a pile of stones. But this isn't just any old pile of stones, because it's been here since at least the 12th century. That's 800 years. 800. It was built to define the boundary between Fountains Abbey, which is about 23 miles, 24 miles northeast of here, and Bolton Priory, which I would guess is about 12 miles southeast of here. These two religious institutions, they own vast tracts of land in this area, which they use to keep sheep. Oh, Fountains Abbey was Cistercian, and Bolton Priory was Augustinian. So this wasn't just this, it's not just a wall between two farms. This is a wall dividing, how can I put it, two very different ways of running the world. Cistercians followed a very strict and literal interpretation of it's known as the rule of St. Benedict, which is quite simple: pray and work and do nothing else. So their goal was total seclusion from the world, focusing on manual labour, silence and prayer. They were the engineers of the Dales. Because they wanted to be self-sufficient and isolated, they became masters of very large-scale agriculture and wool production and water management or water engineering. Augustinians, on the other hand, they were known as canons regular. I don't know if you've heard that expression before. Canons regular means that they live in separate religious communities, but they also acted as the priests for the people. They ran hospitals, they served in parish churches, and they were much more, can't think of the word, integrated into society. They were farmers, but they also got an income from the tithes, which were local taxes, and gifts from local lords and ladies in exchange for spiritual services. So unlike the Cistercians, who, let's face it, they kept themselves to themselves, the Augustinians were the pastors of the community, rather than, they weren't just reclusive farmers. This valley that I'm in is called the Watlows, and this wall runs right up the centre of it. It's just amazing. I think it's amazing. On the west side of the wall, owned by Fountains Abbey, you had this massive, silent, corporate-style sheep operation. On the east side of the wall, owned by Bolton Priory, you had a slightly more, only just slightly, local community-focused estate. Anyway, that's enough waffle. Let's get back to the wall. Stay focused. One of the main reasons this wall is still here is that it wasn't used by or paid for by local farmers. It was created to mark a significant medieval boundary. So the foundations are extremely solid and sturdy. And, you know, while the monks were wealthy, the walls, I'm trying to think of a good word, robustness was more about creating a permanent, indisputable and maintenance-free border between two powerful religious communities. One of the main reasons this wall is still here is it moves. Okay, only slightly, you know, but any sort of movement can make a stone wall fall over if it's not designed and constructed to cope with it. So let's start right at the very bottom, and that's not the lowest point that you can actually see. It's actually underground. This wall has, it's what's known as orthostat foundations, and this is very expensive. Orthostats are they're huge boulders or slabs set vertically into the ground. Not how cheaper farmers' walls are made, just with big stones that are laid flat. Orthostats provide an extremely stable anchor for all the stonework above. On top of the orthostats, there's two parallel faces of walls are built simultaneously, which is the bit you can actually see. And the gap between these two faces is packed tightly with something called hearting, which is small irregular stones and rubble and what have you. And the infill is critical because it acts like a liquid core, and this allows the wall to flex slightly with ground movement without collapsing. When the ground freezes and thaws it does move slightly. To prevent the two faces peeling apart under the weight of all that infill, through stones are also placed at regular intervals. They go all the way through both faces, and these through stones span the entire width of the wall, so that locks the two sides together. On top of the wall, this stuff here, this is finished with a layer of, they're called coping stones or top stones or capstones. Most people just call them cams. Now, unlike typical tapered dry stone walls, which you can see all over the Yorkshire Dales, this specific type of medieval boundary, the sides go straight up, so it's got a wide top at the top, and it's got the coping overhangs slightly. The two reasons for this is both of which involve animals jumping over the wall. The first is it's an anti-escape plan. That's the only way I can put it. It stops the sheep jumping over the wall, you know, onto the other religious estate's land. That would cause problem. The second reason is to stop wolves from jumping over the wall, you know, which in the 12th century was a very real concern because sheep are expensive. Also, these heavy top stones, they provide downward pressure needed to compress all the layers below, and it keeps the liquid hearting layer, you know, secure. It stops it spilling out. So that's, you know, this wall is going right up the centre of the Watlows. Oh, what does Watlows mean? Good question. Thank you for asking. Oh, more waffle. The first bit could be from two sources, really. Maybe from the Viking word Watton, or the Anglo-Saxon word Weta, which both mean water. And the second part, lows, that's almost certainly Anglo-Saxon. In those days, lows would mean a prominent isolated hill, like you get the town of Ludlow or Marlow. But in northern England, at that time, it actually meant the exact opposite. So, you know, a low. It meant a low place like the bottom of the valley, or, you know, a dip. So Watton Low or Waterlow became Watlows. I think I need more tea. It's to cut out this waffle. A cup of tea time. I've turned the camera around so you can actually see all the way down the valley. And if you look, can you see that it's roughly U-shaped? It's like that. Do you remember from your school days when you were taught that a U-shaped valley was created by moving ice, you know, and a V-shaped valley was created by water? But this place is different. Here, this U-shaped valley that you can see, this was made by water. And the reason for this is it wasn't made just by any old water. It was made by a massive torrent of glacial meltwater at the end of the last ice age. This entire area is covered by a thick layer of limestone, which is full of cracks and holes. And this means that any water that's around will simply go underground and eventually into caves. But 12,000 years ago, the temperature was much, much colder. This meant that the water that soaked into the ground froze solid inside the rock, turning this whole landscape into a massive block of ice, concrete, you know, solid. And this effectively plugged the drains, forcing the melting glacial water to stay on the surface. And because the drains were plugged, you know, the caves, a huge, massive volume of water roared through this valley under incredible pressure. I know, so if you want to be technical, it's called periglacial meltwater, but that's waffle. This water filled the gorge, and as it couldn't erode the rock, you know, because it was frozen underneath, it scoured the floor and the sides at the same time. So that's, you know, this powerful, pressure washing effect is what carved out this wide, flat-bottomed valley that you can, you know, that's why this U-shaped valley is unusual, because it was actually created by water and not ice. And that's just got nothing at all to do with that wall, has it? It's just, I'll cut that piece out. U-shaped valleys and no, that's just too much waffle. I'll cut that piece out. Nobody will ever see it. Hang on, here we go. Thanks. There's always something interesting. Thanks for watching.